Hello and welcome to Invisible Hate. I am Saadia Khan.
And I'm Asad Butt.
In 2011, in Bergholz, Ohio, there lives an isolated, ultra-conservative Amish sect of about 18 families led by 66-year-old Samuel Mullet Sr. They've long since broken away from traditional and pacifist Amish ideas. Over an 8-week period, several members of Mullet's community commit sneak attacks in the homes of members of neighboring sects. Using hired drivers, they break in during the night, restrain their victims, and forcibly cut women's hair and men's beards, often with horse shears. Anyone that tries to come to the rescue of the victims is hurt. To add to the humiliation, photographs are taken of victims with a disposable camera. In total, there are 9 victims over the course of at least 5 different nights in 3 different counties, though not all the crimes are reported. The case will go on to be the first in Ohio to apply the 2009 historic federal law that we've mentioned before, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. This is Invisible Hate. Welcome back to Invisible Hate, a weekly true crime podcast in which Asad and I attempt to uncover the ugly truths behind various hate crimes, both recent and historical.
That's right, Saadia. Many of the cases that we discuss involve crimes committed against minority groups, and our goal, as always, is to determine through a discussion of the nuances and complexities whether or not these transgressions can be considered hate crimes. And before we get into today's case, Saadia, it's been a while. How have you been?
I've been good, Asad, but I have a bone to pick.
Oh, with me or with someone else? Uh-oh, I'm nervous now.
No, with WhatsApp groups admins.
That's a very specific WhatsApp group admins. Okay.
Now, I'm not a big fan of WhatsApp, and I don't know about you, but I try to leave a lot of groups that people put me in. That's something that I do normally, which is rude. I don't think others should follow.
Are these like between like friends and family?
I mean, it's all sorts of groups, right? It's college groups, friends, community groups, all sorts of different groups. And I have left quite a few.
Okay.
But you know what? The problem that I see happening is people don't ask others before adding them to certain groups, right? I would prefer somebody, reaching out and saying, hey, we are creating this group. Do you want to be part of it? And then give me the option to either say yes or no.
Yeah.
I hate it when people automatically add me to all these different groups that they think I may be interested in. And I could be interested in a cause. I could be interested in different people in that group, but I may still not be interested in that group. You know what I'm saying?
And yeah, the daily communication for sure. So is this an immigrant problem? Because I'm not invited to a lot of WhatsApp groups.
You're right. Oh my gosh, it could be an immigrant problem.
No, I'm not trying to stereotype here, but...
No, you're right. You're right.
My primary group text is through whatever messages app on
iMessages, right?
Right, iMessages and stuff like that. And WhatsApp is really limited to some community things, and then also just communications that I have with people abroad.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I'm not trying to stereotype, but yeah.
Keeping that aside, would you get annoyed and offended if somebody just added you to a WhatsApp or any group without asking you first?
Yeah, I think so. So I guess maybe a question is, when it happens on iMessage for you, do you get annoyed?
The interesting thing is it doesn't happen on iMessage for me.
Okay. It's only on WhatsApp.
It's only on WhatsApp.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I've left so many groups, Asad. I cannot even count anymore.
And there's got to be a way to prevent that from happening. There's got to be a way.
I don't think there is. Unfortunately, when you leave a group, everybody finds out.
Yeah, right.
So you can't really sneak out of a group. You just have to almost announce it to the world.
That's how they get you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am like, I do feel guilty now. If anybody who knows me is listening, this is not targeted at you. It's just my general observation that I'm sharing right now. I may get in trouble for saying all that I just said, but
yeah. I hope that people understand that there's only so much attention that we can give to things, and that I think it's a good thing that you're trying to get out of groups that are trying to take your attention away from you, because it's a limited resource.
Yeah, but I said I don't do it as often. I mean, I do want to get out of a couple of groups I'm part of right now, and I feel bad. I feel so guilty doing it, because then everybody will be like, oh my gosh, what does she think, right?
Yeah, right.
So
she doesn't believe in this cause anymore. Just do it. Who cares what people think, Saadia? I think you'll be okay.
Yeah. How's your week going?
Yeah, so Saadia, we just got back from a long weekend in this place in Washington called Leavenworth. Have you heard of it?
No.
Yeah, Leavenworth is a German town. It's a town of basically like Bavarian culture. It's up in the mountains, and so like pretzels and beer for people that drink beer, and sausages. Chicken sausage and stuff like that, but everything's kind of like Bavarian culture. And we found out it's really cute. It's a really nice little town, and it's surrounded by these beautiful mountains. But we found out that it's not Bavarian because German immigrants came. They actually voted in like the 60s to like make it a German Bavarian theme to attract tourists. And so it's almost like a little Disneyland, as opposed to other places in the country. Like there's places that are Bavarian themed because a lot of German or Scandinavian or whatever immigrants have lived there for, decades and decades. But yeah,
wow,
anyway.
Asad, you travel a lot for somebody who has a baby.
Yeah. We like to experience things, and it was a drive, so it wasn't too bad. And she survived.
Good for you.
So Saadia, with that, should we get started?
Yes. So Asad, this is definitely a story unlike others we've covered. First of all, let's talk about the Amish, because if our listeners are anything like me, they may not know a lot about them. Ohio is home to about 60,000 Amish people. The Amish faith is a denomination of Christianity. By the way, Asad, I thought it was just a completely different religion, which is it's my bad. I didn't know this, but this is a denomination of Christianity, one that generally celebrates simplicity, humility, and separation from the modern world.
Yeah, I think most people would be more familiar with the Pennsylvania Amish communities, and that's something that, like, when we were growing up, when we were on road trips, we went to go visit their communities, whatnot. But I did not know that there was a community in Ohio as well. That's interesting.
And you know what I said? All these different communities have different practices, doctrines, and views on technology, right? They are not all the same, but all are generally very peaceful and forgiving people.
For sure.
Now, Samuel Mullet Sr., he's a bishop, or you could call him head of an Amish group. He decides to form his own community in 1995, allegedly after some religious disagreements. He's described as a fire and brimstone preacher and a ruthless dictator.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's seen by his followers as a prophet of God, interpreting Bible for his people, which is unheard of in Amish culture. So he is not a typical Amish bishop.
Yeah. You got to love these people who think that they're a prophet of God. There have been how many billions of people in the world in the history of mankind? And I don't know, the ego on someone to think that they are
right.
the special one is really fascinating to me.
And he imposes these strict rules, right? So censoring all mail, doling out punishments like paddling and confinement in animal coops, and threatening dissenters with possession by the devil. I honestly don't even know what that means. He also forces sex on married women in the community as part of marital counseling and absolution, including his own daughter-in-law,
Oh, man.
which is pretty messed up, right?
Yeah, really messed up.
He is the father of 18 children, Asad. So no family planning there. In 2006, he excommunicates several members, causing bishops of surrounding communities to denounce him. In 2009, for unknown reasons, local police seize 2 of his granddaughters and grant custody to their father, presumably in a neighboring community. So his son-in-law may have been excommunicated as well.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of differences with people. And I mean, this is a obviously very extreme version of the culture, religion. You might not even call it that. It's just a cult almost, with him at the center of it.
Exactly. Malit's wife says that their son-in-law has a history of physically and sexually abusing his wife. This is when a feud with law enforcement starts and only furthers the contention with other Amish groups. In 2010, Malit starts the practice of cutting the hair of some of his own members to teach them a lesson.
Yeah, so Saadia, what is the importance of hair in the Amish community? I forgot about this.
So Asad, hair holds great religious significance in Amish culture. They interpret the Bible as saying men should grow beards and women should keep their hair long once married. It's a sign of entering adulthood and marital status, and cutting any hair is demeaning. So in 2011, Malit decides to use this practice to punish his critics and dissenters, which is pretty messed up.
Yeah.
Between September 6th and November 9th of that year, at least 9 men and women are ambushed and assaulted, including some parents of the attackers. Take a listen to this clip from News 5 Cleveland about the attacks.
"Don't shear me," Barbara Miller said she yelled last September 6th. Her daughter, Nancy Miller, then testified her parents deserved to have their hair sheared as a message because they weren't living a proper lifestyle and needed salvation, she said. Barbara testified, "My husband was held down. They were cutting his beard and yelling. It was horrifying for me to see my boys treat their dad like that." Barbara said they were left bruised and bloodied.
Saadia, I mean, I think maybe some listeners might think, oh, it's just cutting the hair, that's not significant. But, as you can hear from the clip, like, imagine being held down and then someone using scissors or whatever to cut your hair. And that's something that it's important to you religiously, culturally, you name it. Like, that's scary, traumatic, shocking. And certainly it's also a mark of shame, right? So until the hair grows back or whatever, you're walking around with this very public display of being a victim.
You're absolutely right, Asad. And as I was listening to this clip, imagine a mom being subjected to this kind of violation of her physical proximity, and then the daughter endorsing the practice, and expecting her parents to go on some path of salvation or something, right? This is so messed up. And as you said, this is a violation in so many different ways, and it could really be traumatic for people who were subjected to it, basically.
Totally.
Now, get this, Malit does not participate directly, but supposedly orchestrates the abuse. Intense fear disseminates through the large Amish community nearby. One victim says he would rather have been, and I quote, beaten black and blue than to suffer the disfigurement and humiliation of having his hair removed. And you know what? Normally, disputes among the Amish are resolved in their own jurisdiction. They strongly believe in forgiveness, which results in dictating their own punishments and avoiding pressing charges or involving our courts. However, some, but not all victims report these assaults to local police, stating that Malit's sect is a cult. This is what you said in the beginning, Asad, right?
Yeah, totally.
The Jefferson County Sheriff receives hundreds of calls.
Wow.
Consequently, law enforcement and the FBI gets involved. They raid several houses before dawn and arrest Malit plus 16 of his followers. Nearly 36 children in the Bergholz community are left without one, or both parents.
Wow.
The women that are arrested, who are all mothers, are eventually freed on bail. Mullet and 6 others are held without bond. And then the FBI begins investigating potential federal hate crime charges.
Saadia, I'm so interested in learning more about this story, but let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the investigation and then the reaction to it. This is Invisible Hate. Welcome back to Invisible Hate. So, Saadia, this doesn't strike me immediately as being a violation of any sort of federal law. Obviously, it seems maybe local laws or whatever, but why did the FBI get involved, or how did they get involved?
So, Asad, as far as we know, the head of the FBI in Northern Ohio, Stephen Anthony, says hate crimes are a priority for the agency. The Bureau gets involved with civil rights cases, and in this instance, because the attacks were escalating, right? So maybe the attacks were happening more frequently.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe
Yeah.
people were complaining. As we mentioned, they received hundreds of calls. Also, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act has recently passed, which defined hate crimes as attacks motivated by gender, sexual orientation, disability, race, ethnicity, or religion. And as I mentioned, there have been no convictions yet in Ohio under the Act, which increases penalties for crimes fueled by bigotry. You know what? Prosecutors believe this is absolutely a crime provoked by religion, right?
Seems like it, yeah, and good for them on investigating it.
So during the investigation, the FBI gets a tip and recovers the disposable camera used during the crimes, which has been buried under a tree. Those arrested are charged with federal hate crimes, conspiracy, and obstruction. Take a listen to another clip from News 5 Cleveland about hate crime charges.
Lee, the Justice Department making it clear that in the Amish community, a man's hair and beard are sacred, and any effort to forcibly shave or cut that hair, in their eyes, is elevated to the level of a hate crime. U.S. Attorney Steve Dettelbach says this is not the way religious disputes are resolved in this country.
In our tradition, such differences, to the extent that they're solved or talked about, are debated by theologians and argued about passionately, but they are not resolved by late-night visits to people's homes with weapons and violent attacks.
The case makes national headlines, especially concerning the applicability of the Federal Hate Crime Act, which carries much harsher sentences. It's an unusual case to begin with, right? Plus, intra-denominational disputes are not often charged as hate crimes.
Mm-hmm.
As for the victims and their families, some think Mullet should get a stiff sentence, but that the other perpetrators should serve much less time and be required to have cult deprogramming counseling. I wonder what cult deprogramming counseling would look like, Asad.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. And yeah, I don't know if that's an actual psychiatric thing or what, but that's really interesting to me.
Mullet's wife claims her husband is gentle and does not wield power people think he does. I mean, this is bullshit, right? At least the evidence suggests otherwise. Her and her grandson grant rare interviews stating the assaults did not cause any lasting harm. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And that a hate crime charge and long prison sentence are unwarranted. Mullet, for his part, continually denies that he was the mastermind behind the attacks. One of his sons even claims the idea as his own, saying Mullet merely gives him addresses of people who they've had rifts with. Okay, to me, this is so bizarre. Like,
yeah, here are my enemies. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I've been spouting, violence and rhetoric, and yeah, you can interpret it as you want.
yeah, just go and do whatever you want to.
It's definitely shady, for sure.
I said, imagine if you asked your dad for addresses of folks who he's pissed at. What would he say, right? I mean, this is so crazy.
You would know that, something is about to happen, right? So then this goes to trial then?
Absolutely, it does. The trial takes place in August 2012. Mullet is represented by federal public defender Ed Bryan. The defense doesn't deny the crimes themselves, but claims they were compassionate acts intended to help the victims return to a stricter lifestyle and thus attain salvation. What the hell? What kind of salvation are we talking about, right?
And also, what gives them the right to decide the punishment and all that kind of stuff?
They refer to the attacks as simple assaults motivated by family feuds rather than religion, and thus not hate crimes.
So, at least they're admitting that they were assaults. Yeah, so it looks like they're just trying to get away from being considered a hate crime.
Yeah, and they call no witnesses, Asad.
Oh, interesting.
The prosecution refers to the acts as terrorism and sets out to prove that the hair cutting constitutes disfigurement.
Oh, very interesting. I don't know how I think about this. Okay.
From hate crime to terrorism, again, I'm not an expert, but that seems a bit too much as well. They refer to Mullet as a thug and present the crimes as retaliation against Amish members who had defied Mullet's religious authoritarianism, not personal vendettas. That I agree with. Mullet is not accused of any sex crimes. What? But the government tries to introduce his history of abuse. Okay, this to me is really messed up. Anyways, on September 20th, Mullet and 15 followers are convicted of federal hate crimes, conspiracy, and obstruction. Mullet faces a minimum of 10 years in prison. The prosecution asks for a life sentence for Mullet. The defense asks for 2 years or less. At the sentencing hearing, Mullet says, and I quote, "If somebody needs to be punished, I'll take the punishment for everyone," unquote, while also denying any culpability. I mean, if he is so willing to do it, then he should probably do it. He is sentenced to 15 years. The others get between 1 and 7 years. Several members offer to serve the time for Mullet. So this seems like a cult, Asad, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, Saadia, it seems like the judge agreed with the prosecution that it was a serious crime, that it was a hate crime, and that, for him to go above the minimum that was of 10 years is, really interesting. Let's take another quick break. And when we come back, Saadia, I want to hear about what happens afterwards. Welcome back to Invisible Hate. So, Saadia, the trial is over. He's been sentenced to 15 years and others get between 1 and 7 years. What happens next?
So, Mullet does immediately begin appealing, Asad. But in a strange turn, the family are able to sell oil and gas fracking rights to their land for millions of dollars to fund his legal defense.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Mullet is able to remain the Bergholz leader while incarcerated by receiving visitors and ordering them to carry out his wishes.
Clearly, he's got a lot of power, and clearly him being in prison isn't preventing him from retaining that power. And for people to, if people believe that he is a prophet or a god, prison's not going to stop them from listening to him, right?
You're absolutely right, Asad. Now, legally, the appeals are just as complicated as the trial. I did not know that. The interesting thing is, in this appeals process, the concept of religious freedom is broached. His first attempt at an appeal fails, though. In 2014, however, the 6th U.S. Circuit Court overturns the federal hate crime convictions because of faulty jury instructions.
Interesting.
The trial judge, Judge Bolster, did address the importance of motive in a hate crime conviction, yet twice he overruled the defense's request that the jury be told to determine beyond a reasonable doubt if the assaults would have occurred if religion was taken out of the equation. This is really interesting, Asad. He had advised the jurors that, and I quote, "the faith of the victims must be a significant factor in motivating the assaults," unquote. Whereas the appellate court interpreted the Hate Crime Act as saying that faith must be the key motivating factor.
Oh, that's interesting. So, as we mentioned, one of the first times that hate crime statute is being applied. Yeah, so it's the difference between whether yeah, their religion was a significant versus key factor in the assault. And the appellate court is saying that religion has to be the key motivating factor.
But for me, Asad, how do you make a determination of whether it's significant or key?
Right. And I think that the jury is supposed to determine that, right? But yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
And you know what? To me, the act of violence that was perpetrated was religiously motivated, right? The act itself is based on how hair is perceived in Amish religion. So that could be a key determining factor or motivating factor. But, anyways, while it is not a unanimous decision, the appellate court finds sufficient evidence that the feud was interpersonal rather than religious.
It's so fascinating to me.
So, the non hate crime convictions, perjury and obstructing justice, are not overturned, by the way.
Okay.
Judge Polster maintains that the attacks were religiously motivated regardless of the higher court's decision, but of course honors the outcome. There is this possibility of a retrial, but prosecutors decline. In 2015, Polster reduces everyone's sentences, changing Mullet's from 15 to 10 years plus 9 months. Not too bad. The 4 men who received 7 years instead receive 5. Those who got 5 years get 3 years and 7 months. 8 more sentences are already fulfilled by that. Prosecutors hope the overturning will be reversed. It would hold a lot of weight for future religious hate crimes and beyond. Unchallenged, the appellate court's restrictive interpretation will unfortunately render the federal prosecution of hate crimes more difficult by requiring proof of a single predominant motive.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mullet continues to appeal, trying unsuccessfully to overturn his remaining charges. In 2018, he asks for his sentence to be vacated based on ineffective assistance of counsel during his trial and 2 appeals. That is rejected. The Supreme Court basically denies hearing his case. In 2020, amidst COVID concerns due to his age and cardiac issues, Mullet is transferred to a halfway house in Youngstown, Ohio to finish his sentence. Shortly after, as part of the Elderly Offender Home Confinement Pilot Program, Mullet is allowed to finish his sentence on house arrest. He ends up getting an early release, serving about 8 years of his 10.
The majority of his time.
Not bad.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting case, and the trial just brings up so many questions about hate crimes. Things like, is it possible for someone to commit a hate crime against victims of their own religion or any bias category for that matter? Could one simultaneously have religious freedom constitutionally protected, but claim that religion is not the sole motive in a crime to avoid prosecution? And then, I think, also, should the legal system even apply to the Amish community? What are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh, Asad, I have so many thoughts. First, look, only Amish people were assaulted. The manner of assault, as I said previously, had specific religious significance.
For sure.
Mullet was known to punish those that went against his extremist beliefs. So religion seems to be at the center of all that unfolded, right? And to me, it seems like a significant motivating factor in the attack. And of course, people can commit crimes, hate crimes against their own. I mean, we've seen that happening in the past.
Agreed. I think, Saadia, the big cons that we should discuss are Mullet didn't order all of the dissenters to be attacked. As far as we know, only a subsection of the dissenters, and he only punished very specific ones. There was a history of feuds with law enforcement and other families that didn't rise to the level of hate crime. And then do the attacks actually rise to the level of disfigurement if they're just cutting someone's hair? For me, that last one at least, yes. I mean, I think especially in the religious context, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I think I lean more towards you in this conversation, and that this was more of a hate crime. It was motivated by them not being religious enough. And then
Exactly.
the hair is such a prominent display of one's religiosity for this community. And so, I think it would, for me, it's the same as like if someone would rip off the yarmulke off of a Jewish person's head and like start breaking it up or like, throwing it out or whatever it may be. Like that's a visible manifestation of their faith, and you are intentionally, trying to destroy that. So, yeah.
You're absolutely right, Asad. And sometimes I think people are unable to correlate because of the manner, and also since the perpetrators and victims are both from the same community. But as I said previously, it can happen. It can still happen. The trauma, the impact, the mannerism, the significance of hair, it all points to a hate crime being perpetrated against, yes, members of your own community, but nevertheless, it is a hate crime.
So, Saadia, what is the latest?
So the Bergholz community says that the sentences tore the community apart. Several members left. Malit's wife of 49 years died from cardiac arrest while he was incarcerated, and he was not allowed to attend her funeral. Yeah, this may be a bit too much. Malit was freed in 2021, but likely returned to a very changed community. As far as I could tell, as of 2022, Malit was alive and well and still running the Bergholz community. The appellate court reversal still stands. So Asad, this was a very interesting case, right? First, it is about Amish community that I did not know much about. Then again, the crime is perpetrated by members of the same community against their own in a way. And then applying hate crime statute to religion and how it can be a difficult thing to do, especially in determination of intent. So a very, very interesting case. And I wonder if there are other cases out there that people would like us to look at and cover, because this case, as I said, is unlike any other case that we've covered so far.
Yeah, for sure. And this idea that the religious motivation needs to be the top motivation in order for it to be considered a hate crime is really interesting. And, I think this is one of the reasons why it's so tough for hate crimes to be prosecuted, because the argument can be made that another motivation that's not covered under the hate crime statute is 51% of the motivation.
Yeah, that's so messed up.
For that crime, right? And so it's interesting that you have to the judge thought that it was primarily motivated by religion, but the appellate court did not. And so it's obviously very subjective depending on who you get, either as a judge or as a jury or whatever. And so, yeah, it's really fascinating. And yeah, I want to think about it a little bit more.
Absolutely, Asad. Yeah, and would love to hear your thoughts, listeners. What did you think of this case? Any ideas, any thoughts, any insights? And thank you again for spending some time with Asad and I. Thank you for listening to Invisible Hate with us one more time. If you want to learn more, check out links in the show notes about the case. Please email us your thoughts on this story or any other story that you think we should cover. You can reach us at info@invisiblehatepodcast.com. You can also tweet us or hit us up on Instagram. Just search for Invisible Hate Podcast.
Thanks again for listening. If you like what you hear, please share with a friend. Invisible Hate is a joint production of Rifelion Media and Immigrantly. We'd like to thank our team, which includes Michaela Strather, Emmanuel Monahan, Lindsay Gamble, and Paroma Chakravarti. Our theme music was done by Simon Hutchinson. We'll be back next week with another hate crime for us to analyze. Until then, I'm Asad Butt.
And I'm Saadia Khan.